Jesus spoke to me about forgiveness, and it changed everything. Jonathan Roumie, I need to tell you something that happened to me 6 days ago that sounds so impossible. I almost didn't record this video, but I'm sitting here in my trailer in Goshen, Utah at 2 a.m., unable to sleep because Jesus appeared to me while I was having the worst panic attack of my life and taught me something about forgiveness that has completely shattered everything I thought I knew about healing. But before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps give me the strength to speak my truth. Now let's get into my story. We're here in Utah, filming the final episodes of The Chosen, and it should be the most triumphant time of my career. 6 years of portraying Jesus, millions of lives touched, a legacy that will outlast anything I could have imagined. But 6 days ago, I was curled up on the bathroom floor of my hotel room, hyperventilating and shaking because someone from my past had found me and was threatening to destroy everything I've worked for. I need to be careful about details because there are legal implications, but I can share enough for you to understand the spiritual breakthrough that came from what felt like my darkest moment. 12 years ago, before I was cast as Jesus, before I had any kind of platform or public recognition, I made a mistake that hurt someone deeply. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but the impact was devastating regardless of my intentions. It was a business situation that went wrong, a partnership that collapsed, and in the aftermath, someone I had considered a friend lost a significant amount of money and blamed me entirely for the failure. At the time, I genuinely believed I had done everything I could to make the situation right. I had apologized repeatedly, tried to work out payment plans, offered what little I had to help cover their losses. But they were so angry, so hurt, so convinced that I had deliberately betrayed them that every attempt I made to reconcile only seemed to make things worse. Eventually, they cut off all communication. They moved across the country. I heard through mutual friends that they were telling anyone who would listen that I was a fraud, a liar, someone who couldn't be trusted. For months, I lived in fear that their accusations would follow me everywhere, that every audition, every opportunity, every relationship would be poisoned by their version of events. But time passed. They disappeared from my life completely. I threw myself into my faith, into acting, into trying to become a better person. When I was cast as Jesus 5 years later, I saw it as God's redemption of my past failures. I thought the chapter was closed. I was wrong. 6 days ago, I was in my hotel room after a particularly emotional day of filming Jesus' final conversations with his disciples. We had been shooting the scenes where Jesus talks about forgiveness, about loving your enemies, about blessing those who curse you. Powerful, beautiful moments that had left the entire cast in tears. I was decompressing, scrolling through my emails before bed when I saw a message that made my blood run cold. It was from them, the person I had hurt 12 years ago. The subject line simply read, "Time for truth." My hands were shaking as I opened it. The message was long, detailed, and filled with 12 years of accumulated bitterness. They had been watching The Chosen. They had seen me playing Jesus, talking about love and forgiveness and redemption, and they were disgusted. They wrote about how nauseating it was to watch someone who had destroyed their life portraying the Son of God. They detailed every way they believed I had wronged them, every consequence they had suffered, every year of struggle they attributed to my actions. They said I was a hypocrite, a false teacher, someone who had no right to represent Jesus when I hadn't even made things right with the people I had hurt. But the worst part was the threat at the end. They said they had been documenting everything for years. Every interview where I talked about my faith, every scene where I portrayed forgiveness, every moment where I had presented myself as someone who followed Jesus. They were planning to release it all publicly, to tell their story to every news outlet that would listen, to make sure the world knew what kind of person was really playing Jesus. "You have 1 week to publicly acknowledge what you did to me and make full financial restitution," they wrote. Or, "I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you really are." I stared at that email for what felt like hours, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. 12 years of healing, of growth, of believing God had redeemed my past. All of it felt like it was crumbling in an instant. The panic started slowly. First, just a tightness in my chest, then difficulty breathing, then The familiar spiral of catastrophic thinking that I hadn't experienced since my early 20s. What if they were right? What if I was a hypocrite? What if God had made a mistake in choosing me for this role? I tried to pray, but my mind was racing too fast for coherent thoughts. I tried to call Dallas, but it was 1 a.m. in Utah and 3 a.m. in Dallas. I considered calling my priest, my therapist, my family, but what could anyone say that would make this better? The rational part of my brain knew I should wait until morning, should consult with lawyers and publicists and crisis management experts. But the broken part of my soul was convinced that my life as I knew it was over, that everything I had built was about to be destroyed by someone whose pain I had never fully acknowledged. That's when the panic attack really hit. Suddenly, I couldn't breathe at all. My vision started tunneling. My hands went numb. I stumbled to the bathroom and collapsed on the cold tile floor, gasping for air that wouldn't come. I had experienced panic attacks before, in my 20s when I was struggling as an actor in LA, but this was different. This wasn't just anxiety about the future. This was the complete unraveling of my sense of self. If I really was the person they described in that email, if I really had caused that much pain and never properly acknowledged it, then who was I to play Jesus? Who was I to talk about love and forgiveness when I might be fundamentally lacking in both? Lying there on that bathroom floor, shaking and hyperventilating, I felt more spiritually empty than I had ever felt in my life. Not just afraid of what might happen to my career, but genuinely questioning whether I had been living a lie for 12 years. That's when I did something I hadn't done since I was a child. I cried out to God not with words, but with pure, desperate need, like a drowning person reaching for anything that might save them. Jesus, I gasped between sobs. I don't know if I'm the person I think I am. I don't know if I deserve to play you. I don't know if I've ever really understood forgiveness at all. If you're real, if you're here, I need you to show me the truth about everything. The bathroom was silent except for my ragged breathing. The hotel air conditioning hummed in the background. Outside, I could hear the occasional car passing on the highway. Normal sounds of a normal night in a world that suddenly felt completely foreign to me. But then something began to shift in the atmosphere of that small hotel bathroom. The air became thicker, somehow, more present. The panic that had been crushing my chest started to ease, not because the situation had changed, but because I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. And then I heard a voice, not audible exactly, but clearer than any sound I'd ever heard, gentle but firm, familiar but otherworldly. Jonathan, get up. We need to talk. I opened my eyes and saw him sitting on the edge of the bathtub, as real and solid as I am right now. Jesus. Not the way I portray him in the show, but unmistakably him. His presence filled that tiny bathroom with such overwhelming peace that my panic attack stopped immediately. He was looking at me with the most compassionate eyes I'd ever seen, full of understanding for someone who had finally reached the end of his own strength. You asked me to show you the truth, he said, his voice carrying the weight of eternity, but the tenderness of a friend. Are you ready to hear it? All I could do was nod, still lying on that bathroom floor, still shaking from the emotional earthquake that had brought me to this moment. The truth, he said, is that forgiveness isn't what you think it is. And until you understand what it really is, you'll never be free from the prison you've been living in for 12 years. He gestured toward my phone, where that devastating email was still open on the screen. Tell me, what do you think forgiveness means? I struggled to form words. I thought it meant saying sorry and trying to make things right. I thought it meant the other person letting go of their anger. Jesus shook his head sadly. That's what the world thinks forgiveness is. That's why both of you have been trapped in this cycle of pain for so long. You've been trying to earn forgiveness through perfect behavior, and they've been withholding forgiveness until they feel you've suffered enough. He leaned forward, his gaze intense with love. But that's not forgiveness at all. That's just another form of transaction, another way of keeping score. Real forgiveness has nothing to do with the other person's response and everything to do with your own heart. I was confused, but don't I need to make things right with them? Don't I need their forgiveness? You need to take responsibility for your actions, he said. You need to acknowledge the pain you caused and do what you can to repair the damage. But their forgiveness isn't something you can earn or control. It's something they have to choose to give. Jesus stood up and began pacing the small bathroom, his presence somehow making the cramped space feel infinite. And here's what neither of you understands. Forgiveness isn't primarily about your relationship with them. It's about your relationship with me. When you truly receive my forgiveness, when you understand the depth of grace I've shown you, it changes how you see everything else. I felt tears starting again, but these were different tears. Not tears of panic, but tears of recognition. You've been carrying guilt about this situation for 12 years, he continued. Not because you haven't been forgiven, but because you haven't accepted the forgiveness that was already yours the moment you first asked for it. The truth of this hit me like a physical blow. I had been forgiven. God had forgiven me the first time I had genuinely repented of my mistakes in that business partnership, but I had never really believed it. I had been trying to earn through good behavior what had already been freely given through grace. And they, Jesus said, looking at my phone again, have been carrying bitterness for 12 years, not because you haven't apologized enough, but because they've been waiting for an apology that could never be big enough to heal the wound in their heart. They're asking you to do something only I can do. I sat up slowly, beginning to understand. So what do I do? Jesus smiled, and it was the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen. You learn what forgiveness really is, not just so you can respond to their email correctly, but so you can be free. So they can be free. So everyone watching your life can see what real forgiveness looks like. He sat back down on the edge of the tub. Are you ready for me to teach you? Because once you understand this, everything changes. Your relationship with your past, your relationship with other people, your relationship with yourself, all of it transforms when you really grasp what forgiveness is. I nodded, feeling more ready to learn than I had ever felt in my life. Then let's begin, Jesus said, because the truth about forgiveness is going to set you free from a prison you didn't even know you were in. Jesus settled back on the edge of the bathtub, his presence transforming that small hotel bathroom into something that felt like sacred space. The panic that had consumed me minutes earlier was completely gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of safety and anticipation. The first thing you need to understand about forgiveness, he began, is that it's not an emotion, it's a decision. You've been waiting to feel forgiving toward yourself before you could believe you were forgiven. But forgiveness doesn't require feeling, it requires choosing. He gestured toward my heart. Right now, in this moment, you can choose to receive the forgiveness I died to give you. Not because you've earned it through 12 years of good behavior, not because you've suffered enough guilt, but because it's already yours. It was yours the moment I said, "It is finished," on the cross. I felt something breaking open in my chest. Not breaking apart, but breaking open like a dam that had been holding back an ocean of grace. But how do I know I'm really forgiven? I asked. How do I know I haven't just been deceiving myself all these years? Jesus leaned forward, his eyes full of infinite tenderness. Because I'm here, talking to you in a hotel bathroom at 2 a.m., after you just had a panic attack about your worst mistake. Does this look like rejection to you? Does this feel like condemnation? Tears were streaming down my face as the truth of what he was saying penetrated my heart. God wasn't waiting for me to prove my worthiness. He was pursuing me in my unworthiness. The second truth about forgiveness, Jesus continued, is that it's not about forgetting the past. It's about changing how the past affects your present. You've been living as if your mistake 12 years ago defines who you are today. But that's not what forgiveness does. Forgiveness separates your identity from your actions. He stood up and walked to the mirror above the sink, touching his reflection gently. When I look at you, I don't see someone who made a mistake in a business partnership. I see my beloved son who has been growing and learning and becoming more like me every day since then. Your past informed your journey, but it doesn't define your destination. This revelation was staggering. I had been carrying the identity of someone who hurt a friend for 12 years, letting it color every relationship, every decision, every moment of self-doubt. The third truth about forgiveness is that it doesn't require the other person's participation. Their bitterness, their anger, their refusal to let go, none of that changes your forgiveness status with me. You've been treating their pain as evidence that you weren't really forgiven, but that's backwards thinking. Jesus returned to his seat, his expression becoming more serious. Their healing is between them and me. Your responsibility is to acknowledge the truth of what happened, take ownership of your part, and do what you can to make amends. But you can't heal their heart. Only I can do that. I thought about all the years I had spent, wondering if they were okay, if they had recovered financially, if they still hated me. I had been carrying responsibility for their emotional well-being that was never mine to carry. The fourth truth about forgiveness, he said, is that it's not a one-time event, it's a daily practice. Every day, you have to choose to live from forgiveness rather than from guilt. Every day, you have to choose to believe what I say about you rather than what your shame says about you. He paused, watching my face carefully. You've been practicing guilt for 12 years, Jonathan. You've gotten very good at it. Now you need to practice forgiveness with the same dedication. How do I do that? I asked. The same way you learned to play me on screen, through repetition, through study, through surrender. Every morning, you remind yourself, I am forgiven, I am loved. I am not defined by my worst moment. Every time the guilt tries to return, you speak that truth out loud. The fifth truth came with gentle conviction. Forgiveness requires grieving what was lost, not denying that loss occurred. You've been trying to minimize the impact of what happened, telling yourself it wasn't that bad, that they overreacted. But real forgiveness acknowledges the full weight of the damage. This hit me hard. I realized I had been protecting myself from the full reality of the pain I had caused, thinking that minimizing it would make the guilt more manageable. But it had actually made forgiveness impossible. Tell me, Jesus said, what was really lost in that situation? For the first time in 12 years, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. They lost money they couldn't afford to lose. They lost trust in business partnerships. They lost their sense of safety in the world. And I lost a friend. I lost my own sense of integrity. I lost years of peace. Jesus nodded approvingly. Yes, those losses were real. Your actions contributed to real damage in a real person's life. Acknowledging that isn't wallowing in guilt. It's taking responsibility. And responsibility is the foundation of true forgiveness. The sixth truth about forgiveness, he continued, is that it always costs something. It cost me my life. It will cost you your pride, your need to be seen as perfect, your control over how others perceive you. I felt fear creeping back in. So I should agree to their demands, pay them back publicly, acknowledge everything? You should do what love requires, Jesus said simply. Not what fear demands, not what pride protects, but what love requires. And love always requires truth. Truth about what happened, truth about your part in it, truth about your genuine remorse. He stood up again, this time walking to the small window that looked out over the Utah landscape. The seventh truth about forgiveness is that it's designed to restore relationship, not just relieve guilt. The goal isn't just for you to feel better about what happened. The goal is for healing to occur wherever possible. But what if they don't want relationship restored? I asked. What if they just want to hurt me back? Jesus turned from the window, his expression infinitely sad. Then you love them anyway. You do what's right regardless of their response. You plant seeds of healing even if you never see them grow. The eighth truth about forgiveness, he said, returning to sit beside me on the bathroom floor, is that it breaks generational cycles of pain. When you choose forgiveness over retaliation, when you choose vulnerability over defensiveness, when you choose love over self-protection, you're not just healing this situation, you're modeling a different way of being human. I thought about all the people who would be watching how I handled this crisis, fans of the show, fellow believers, people who look to me as some kind of spiritual leader. My response could either perpetuate cycles of bitterness and defensiveness or demonstrate what radical forgiveness actually looks like. The ninth truth about forgiveness is that it requires community. You can't do this alone. The shame that's been eating at you for 12 years has thrived in isolation. Forgiveness happens in relationship, with me, with trusted friends, with spiritual mentors who can remind you of truth when you forget. Jesus reached out and touched my shoulder. Who in your life knows the full truth about this situation? I realized with horror that almost no one did. I had carried this shame in secret for 12 years, telling myself I was protecting others from having to deal with my mess. But really, I had been protecting myself from having to face the full reality of what had happened. No one, I whispered. I've been carrying this alone. That ends now, he said firmly. Shame dies in the light of honest relationship. You're going to tell Dallas what happened. You're going to tell your priest. You're going to tell the people who love you and let them love you through this. The thought terrified me, but I could also feel the truth of what he was saying. The isolation had been killing me slowly for 12 years. The 10th truth about forgiveness, Jesus said, his voice becoming softer, is that it reveals who you really are instead of hiding who you used to be. You've been afraid that acknowledging this mistake would destroy people's faith in you. But real forgiveness shows people that redemption is possible, that growth is real, that God can work through broken people. He gestured toward the door of the bathroom, beyond which lay my entire life and career. The person who made that mistake 12 years ago was operating from wounds and insecurities and spiritual immaturity. The person you are now has been transformed by years of seeking me, serving others, growing in wisdom and compassion. Forgiveness doesn't erase the journey, it redeems it. But what if I lose everything? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. What if the show gets canceled? What if no one wants to work with me? What if my reputation is destroyed? Jesus smiled again, but this time it was a smile of complete confidence. Jonathan, your reputation was never the foundation of your calling. Your gifting was never the source of your security. Your platform was never the measure of your worth. All of those things come from me, and what I give, no one can take away. He stood up and extended his hand to help me up from the bathroom floor. Besides, you're asking the wrong question. The question isn't, what will this cost me? The question is, what will this free me to become? As I took his hand and stood up, I felt something fundamental shifting in my understanding of myself and my situation. For 12 years, I had been living in a prison of unresolved guilt and fear. But forgiveness, real forgiveness, was the key that could unlock not just my cell, but their cell too. The final truth about forgiveness, Jesus said, looking directly into my eyes, is that it's not just about what happened between you and them. It's about what's happening between you and everyone you'll ever meet for the rest of your life. When you truly understand how completely you've been forgiven, it changes how you see every other person's failures, mistakes, and brokenness. I felt the weight of this truth settling into my heart. My response to this crisis wouldn't just affect my relationship with this one person from my past. It would set the template for how I responded to conflict, criticism, and hurt for the rest of my life. So what do? I asked. How do I respond to their email? Jesus was beginning to fade slightly, like morning light slowly overtaking darkness. You respond with truth, with humility, with genuine acknowledgement of their pain. Not because it will guarantee the outcome you want, but because it's what love does. You offer to meet with them, to listen to their full story, to understand the depth of impact your actions had on their life. And if they use that against me publicly, then you trust me with the consequences, he said, his form becoming more translucent. You've been trying to control the narrative for 12 years. It's time to let go of control and trust that truth, even painful truth spoken in love, is always the right choice. As he continued to fade, Jesus said one final thing. The forgiveness you're about to experience and extend will be the most important scene you ever perform, Jonathan. Because this time, you won't be acting. You'll be living the gospel in real time, in real consequences, with real people. And that's what I've been preparing you for all along. And then he was gone. leaving me alone in that hotel bathroom with the most profound sense of clarity and purpose I had ever experienced. The panic was completely gone. The fear was still there, but it was no longer controlling me. For the first time in 12 years, I felt free. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw something I hadn't seen in over a decade, my own face without the shadow of shame hanging over it. I looked like someone who had finally told the truth, even if only to himself and to God. I walked back to the main room and picked up my phone. The email was still there, still threatening, still filled with 12 years of accumulated pain and anger. But now I could read it differently. Instead of seeing only an attack on my character and career, I could see a human being who had been carrying wounds for far too long, someone who deserved to have their pain acknowledged and their story heard. I began typing a response, not the defensive, lawyer-crafted statement I had been mentally composing earlier, but something completely different. I've read your email multiple times, and I want you to know that I hear your pain, I hear your anger, and I want you to know that both are completely justified. What happened 12 years ago was not okay, and the impact it had on your life was real and devastating. I was young and inexperienced in business, but that's not an excuse. My actions contributed to significant financial and emotional damage in your life, and I am genuinely sorry for that. I know that an apology alone cannot undo the years of struggle you've endured. I know that my success in the years since may feel like salt in the wound. I understand why watching me portray Jesus would be painful and even infuriating when you feel I never properly acknowledged the harm I caused. I would like the opportunity to meet with you in person, to listen to the full impact this situation had on your life, and to discuss what meaningful amends might look like. Not because of your ultimatum, but because it's the right thing to do. Because you deserved this conversation 12 years ago, and you deserve it now. If you're willing, I would like to bring a mediator, perhaps a pastor or a counselor we both trust, so that we can have this conversation in a safe space where your voice can be fully heard and your experience can be fully acknowledged. I'm not asking you to forgive me or to stop your plans to share your story publicly. Those are decisions only you can make. I'm simply asking for the opportunity to take responsibility in a more complete way than I was able to do 12 years ago. Please let me know if you would be willing to meet. If not, I understand. Either way, you have my sincere apology and my commitment to do whatever I can to make this situation right. I read the message 3 times before sending it, each time feeling more certain that this was what love looked like. Not self-protection, not damage control, but genuine accountability and a willingness to face the full consequences of my actions. After I hit send, I called Dallas Jenkins. It was 3 a.m. in Utah, which meant it was 5 a.m. in Texas where he was. I woke him up, but I couldn't wait until morning. Jonathan, what's wrong? Is everything okay? Dallas, I need to tell you something that happened 12 years ago, before The Chosen. Something that might become public and could potentially impact the show. There was a pause. Okay, I'm listening. I told him everything. The business partnership, the financial loss, the years of guilt, the email, the ultimatum. I told him about my encounter with Jesus in the bathroom, about the lessons on forgiveness, about my response to their email. I held nothing back. When I finished, Dallas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that brought tears to my eyes. Jonathan, thank you for trusting me with this. And honestly, this makes me more confident in you as a person and as our Jesus, not less. How can you say that? I asked. Because the Jesus we're portraying isn't someone who never made mistakes. He's someone who understands human brokenness because he lived in it, dwelt with it, redeemed it. Your willingness to take full responsibility, to seek reconciliation even when it's costly, that's exactly what Jesus would do. Dallas and I talked for another hour about how to handle the situation if it became public, about the importance of transparency with the cast and producers, about the difference between managing a crisis and living out our values in real time. Whatever happens, Dallas said before we hung up, we're going to handle this with integrity. If that costs us viewers, costs us money, costs us opportunities, so be it. Some things are more important than success. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with Elizabeth Tabish, George Xanthus, and the other core cast members. I told them the whole story, explained what might be coming, and asked for their support not in protecting the show, but in demonstrating what Christian community looks like when one of its members is facing the consequences of past failures. Their response was overwhelming. Not one person suggested I should fight back or protect my reputation at all costs. Instead, they rallied around the opportunity to show the world what redemption actually looks like. Messy, costly, authentic, and ultimately beautiful. This could be the most powerful testimony any of us ever give, Elizabeth said, not through a scripted scene, but through how we handle real life. 3 days later, I received a response to my email. They were willing to meet. They had found a pastor in their city who was willing to mediate. They weren't making any promises about dropping their plans to go public, but they were willing to have the conversation. I flew to their city the following week. Walking into that meeting was one of the most terrifying and necessary things I had ever done. For 3 hours, I sat and listened as they shared the full impact of what had happened 12 years ago. The financial devastation was worse than I had realized. The emotional trauma had affected their ability to trust in business and personal relationships for years. The bitterness had slowly poisoned their joy in ways they were only beginning to understand. I didn't defend myself. I didn't minimize their pain. I didn't try to explain my side of the story. I just listened, acknowledged, and took responsibility for every part of the situation that was mine to own. At the end of the meeting, something extraordinary happened. They looked at me and said, "I've been waiting 12 years for someone to really hear my story. Not to fix it, not to argue with it, just to hear it. Thank you." We worked out a plan for financial amends that was substantial but manageable. More importantly, we began a process of genuine reconciliation that was about restoration, not just resolution. They still went public with their story, but in a completely different way than they had originally planned. Instead of an attack on my character, it became a testimony about the power of taking responsibility, the possibility of real forgiveness, and the difference between accountability and cancel culture. Now I'm sitting here in my trailer in Utah, 6 days after the most transformative night of my life, and I need to share what I learned, because I know I'm not the only one carrying shame that's been poisoning my soul for years. Maybe you're listening to this and you have someone in your past that you hurt, someone you never properly made amends with, someone whose pain you've been minimizing or avoiding because facing it feels too scary. Or maybe you're the one who was hurt, the one who's been carrying bitterness for years, waiting for an apology that could never be big enough to heal the wound in your heart. Maybe you're like I was, someone who intellectually believes in God's forgiveness but has never really received it, never really let it change how you see yourself and your past. The 10 truths Jesus taught me in that bathroom have become my daily practice, and I want to share them with you because forgiveness isn't just a nice theological concept. It's the key to freedom. First, forgiveness is a decision, not an emotion. You don't have to feel forgiving to choose forgiveness. You don't have to feel forgiven to receive forgiveness. Second, forgiveness separates your identity from your actions. Your worst moment does not define who you are. Your biggest mistake is not your permanent address. Third, forgiveness doesn't require the other person's participation. Their healing is between them and God. Your responsibility is to do what's right regardless of their response. Fourth, forgiveness is a daily practice, not a one-time event. Every day you choose to live from grace rather than guilt, from freedom rather than shame. Fifth, forgiveness requires grieving what was lost, not denying that loss occurred. Real forgiveness acknowledges the full weight of damage without minimizing or excusing it. Sixth, forgiveness always costs something. It will cost you your pride, your need to be right, your control over how others see you, but what it gives you is worth infinitely more than what it costs. Seventh, forgiveness is designed to restore relationship wherever possible. The goal isn't just personal relief, it's healing for everyone involved. Eighth, forgiveness breaks generational cycles of pain. When you choose forgiveness over retaliation, You're modeling a different way of being human. Ninth, forgiveness requires community. Shame thrives in isolation. Healing happens in relationship with people who know your story and love you anyway. 10th, forgiveness reveals who you really are, instead of hiding who you used to be. Your story of redemption is more powerful than your story of perfection ever could be. If you're someone who needs to seek forgiveness from someone you've hurt, stop waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect words. Reach out today. Acknowledge their pain. Take responsibility for your part. Offer to listen to their full story. Don't defend yourself. Just love them well enough to let them be heard. If you're someone who needs to extend forgiveness to someone who hurt you, remember that forgiveness isn't about excusing their behavior or pretending the damage didn't happen. Forgiveness is about releasing yourself from the prison of bitterness. It's about choosing freedom over bondage, healing over hatred. And if you're someone who needs to receive God's forgiveness for your past, stop trying to earn what's already been freely given. Stop waiting to feel worthy before you accept grace. God's forgiveness isn't based on your performance. It's based on His character, and His character never changes. The most beautiful part of this whole experience has been watching how God used my worst fear to set me free from my deepest prison. The thing I was most afraid of, having my past exposed, became the very thing that brought healing to both me and the person I had hurt. That's how God works. He doesn't waste our pain or our mistakes. He redeems them. He uses them. He transforms them into testimonies of His grace. 6 months from now, when the final season of The Chosen airs, people will see me portraying Jesus talking about forgiveness. But they'll also know that the actor playing Him learned what real forgiveness looks like through his own failures, his own need for grace, his own journey from shame to freedom. And I think that makes the message more powerful, not less. Because the world doesn't need perfect people telling them about God's love. The world needs broken people who have experienced God's love telling others how real and transformative and available that love is. Father God, I pray for everyone listening who recognizes themselves in my story. For those carrying shame about their past, help them receive the forgiveness that's already theirs. For those carrying bitterness about someone else's actions, help them choose the freedom that forgiveness brings. For those afraid to face the full truth about situations they've been avoiding, give them courage to take responsibility and seek reconciliation. Help all of us to understand that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing we can do. Help us to see that accountability isn't punishment. It's the path to restoration. Help us to believe that our worst moments can become our greatest testimonies when we let your grace transform them. Thank you for loving us, not despite our failures, but right through them. Thank you for showing us that redemption is always possible, healing is always available, and forgiveness is always the way forward. In Jesus' name, amen. The truth I learned in that hotel bathroom in Utah is the truth that can set anyone free. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past. It's about not letting the past control your future. It's not about pretending damage didn't happen. It's about believing healing is possible. It's not about being perfect. It's about being real. You are not defined by your worst moment. You are not disqualified by your biggest mistake. You are not beyond the reach of grace, no matter what you've done or what's been done to you. Forgiveness is available. Healing is possible. Freedom is waiting. And it all starts with a decision. The decision to stop carrying what was never yours to carry and to start receiving what has always been yours to receive. Thank you for letting me share the most important lesson I've ever learned. I love you all, and Jesus loves you infinitely more.